This episode of Tales from the Lot is sponsored by ShakedownT-shirts.com with unique lot-style T-shirts, license plate frames, coffee mugs, and all sorts of things for Grateful Dead, Fish, Zappa, Panic, and more. ShakedownT-shirts.com, where all U.S. orders over $35 ship free. And just for Tales from the Lot listeners, use the code LOT20 for 20% off of any order. That's LOT20. Tales from the Lot, Episode 2, Horseshoes and Hammer Handles. My guest, Dave Christian's here to talk about 8/26/88 at the Tacoma Dome. Let the good times roll. Hi, this is Tales from the Lot, and today my guest is Dave Christian. We're going to be talking about Tacoma, Washington, 8/26/88, and his awesome experience with that and anything else he wants to talk about. So thanks for being on, Dave. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. So, was this Tacoma show? So you're in Vancouver.
I'm in Vancouver. Yeah.
What kind of a drive is that over to Tacoma?
Well, remember this was a 1988 show, so it's like over 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it wasn't a bad drive. Tacoma is a bit south of Seattle. It's sort of I don't know, probably 30 miles, something like that, south of Seattle. It's really a bedroom community. Although it's a kind of an industrial community all of its own and has a port in addition to Seattle's port. That's kind of where I grew up from. When I grew up, we grew up with the notion that Seattle was kind of in our backyard. The border didn't really matter much because it was before 9/11 and there wasn't that much traffic and it was easy to get across. And one would drive down to Seattle regularly, to go see things. There was a lot of stuff that you could do down there that you couldn't in Canada, and particularly as it got into the 80s and 90s, Seattle got super rich. And there was lots of crap going on there that wasn't going on in Vancouver, which was relatively poor. Mm-hmm. And in the 80s, we didn't think anything of going down to Seattle. And Portland wasn't much further. There was one point, actually, where it was really, really hot. My wife and I, we weren't married at that point, but we were living in this apartment, south-facing apartment in New Westminster that was utterly uninhabitable in the summer. And in order to stay cool, we decided to drive down to a winery that was down near Seattle, just because we could go somewhere that was cool, and realized that, well, we're almost in Seattle. Let's go to Seattle for dinner. And so we did that and then drove home. That's how close it was. You can't do that anymore, both because of the traffic and the border. It's, what would be sort of an hour and 20-minute drive back then is minimum 2 hours now and can be 3, and it's just horrible. And you don't do it unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's sort of a hassle both ways.
Longer answer than you were looking for, but
no, for sure, no. I'm glad to know. So it's interesting. Yeah. And then, so this Tacoma Dome show, was that your first time seeing the Grateful Dead, or had you seen them before?
That was the first time I actually saw them.
Nice.
A bunch of my buddies. The Grateful Dead were kind of around for me, like from the time I was a kid. I was in my mid-20s in 1988. But so, I'd sort of come up and kind of got into music and stuff like that in the early 1970s. And the Grateful Dead was sort of always around. But you didn't really have the full experience because you had to rely on whatever the record stores had here. And Vancouver was a bit parochial. So, you get skeletons from the closet and stuff like that. But, wouldn't have any much. But I had a bunch of buddies who were quite into the Dead, and they started going down to California in the mid-'80s, down to the Greek. And I'm not sure whether there were shoreline shows then, but they definitely went to the Greek for a bunch of runs and things like that. I was the dutiful student and had no money whatsoever, so I didn't go. So I'd hear the tales that they had. Gotcha. So that was the first time that I joined them and went down. It was close. It was also my honeymoon.
Oh, very nice. So, was it the wedding party that all went together?
Not completely. Some of it was. My wife and I had been living with the girl that became my wife a week before that show for about 6 years, and then we got married on the 20th of August and saw the show on the 26th. And there was a few of the people that were at our wedding were also at that show.
Nice. And that was back in the day. Did they do mail order at that point, or was it did you just go stand in line at the record store? Or
I can't remember. I got a feeling it was my buddy Andy who arranged it. He was the guy who used to arrange the trips down to California, and he was super into the Dead. And he was the one who came around and said, hey, Dead are coming to Tacoma. We should go. And I have a feeling he arranged for the tickets. So it was either that, whether he got them through Ticketmaster or whether he did mail order. I'm just not 100% sure.
I found that there's stories even in standing in line at the Ticketmaster, whether like even for me, it was the local record store, and we'd all go down there and line up down the strip mall, and people would go into Target wondering what the hell we're doing standing out there at 3 a.m, so that's cool. And then you all went together. Did you all ride together, separate cars and
separate people? Because remember, we were on our honeymoon, so my wife and I went down together. Yeah, and a bunch of the others went down in a couple of separate cars, and we met outside. And I think we met in and around the lot. How we coordinated it, I'm not sure, but one managed to do those things. Because remember, no internet, no cell phones.
Right.
Basically back then you were doing smoke signals and saying, "Well, I meet you on the corner of First and Carolina at 4:15." Wave.
Yeah, totally. I saw my first shows in '91, and much the same way. Just like, I'll meet you over there. And I grew up really close to Deer Creek, so that was kind of my first experiences seeing the Dead there, and I knew that was kind of my stomping ground. I saw in those late '80s, early '90s. I probably was at Deer Creek 50 times, seeing everybody from like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Motley Crue and just Bad Company, like literally every weekend I was there just seeing whoever I could see, and met a friend who was in the Grateful Dead, and then things were different at that point.
Were you at the show where they crashed the fence?
I was, I was there almost every show from '91 through '95, and I was there, and I remember Desolation Row I think they were doing, and I really dig the song, and my buddy taps me on the shoulder and points behind, and I look behind him, it's like, oh no, and it was just people, and if you've been to Deer Creek, it's so in between the lawn and the pavilion is a paved area, and then on the sides of the restrooms and concessions, paved area, completely full, like just every spot was a human. There was no place to go anymore, and they left the lights on for the whole second set. Like the house lights, and it was, it was not fun, not a good night, but it is what it is. So
oh well,
that whole tour, I didn't do a whole lot of that tour. I did a ton of almost all of summer '94, and then '95 came around, and I had my own band at the time, and I'm like, pick and choose some shows, and because I was doing things, and I'm glad I got to see some there at the end, but 94 was better.
It was a bit rough. Like even in 94, they saw some 93, 94, 95. It got kind of rough. Like in 94, there was 2 shows that we saw. They played 2 nights in Seattle that time. The first night was pretty good. The second night, Jerry was out of it. I mean, there was really nothing there. And the 95 shows, it was over. You could tell it was borrowed time, which it obviously was.
Yeah, indeed. So Tacoma Dome. What was the lot scene like in the? Like I said, I started in '91. Was there much vending going on? Was the drum set?
Oh yeah. When you go in, there was all the guys selling T-shirts and whatever it was, sort of set up around the cars. The Tacoma Dome's kind of a weird place. It's the biggest wooden amphitheater. It's not even an amphitheater. Biggest wooden kind of like covered stadium in the world. And like it's a really really weird thing because it's entirely made out of wood. And normally you think of concrete sort of thing, and it's sort of
the dome is made of wood, even
everything. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's stuck down by the waterfront, so it's a little bit off the beaten track. And Tacoma, I think there's some nice suburbs, but sort of down there, it's right off the I-5, and it's a bit of a rough scene down there. And we're these, quiet little Canadians wandering in, going through this, sort of rough and tumble warehousing and, kind of longshoreman scene. Plus, a bunch of goddamn hippies wandering around down there. It wasn't like it was 1968, but things were still a bit different. But it was a good scene. I mean, everybody was having fun. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. It was hot. It was sunny. Actually, when you got in there, it was just super hot. Yeah. So everybody was having a good time and enjoying it. On the way back out, of course, everyone was vending veggie burritos, the staple food of the Deadhead.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And getting ready for talking to you, I looked up a little bit about the Tacoma Dome. I'd never been there, and saw it was made of wood. And actually, the wood they used, it seemed, was forest that had been taken out during Mount St. Helen or destroyed, and so they had recovered some wood that had been destroyed somehow and used it in
No, that I didn't
that.
know.
Yeah, so I don't know if lava treated wood or what. Wikipedia didn't go into it real in depth, but interesting to know that it was reclaimed wood and yeah, cool place. So
Yeah, that was it. I think it was the only time the Dead ever played there. They do have concerts there from time to time, but I think it's primarily like an agricultural show place, where they'll run around and have like rodeos and, cow exhibitions and stuff like that.
So they don't have a sports team playing in there, I don't think.
Not that I'm aware of, no. Yeah.
Huh.
Seattle sucks up everything down there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a big place, though. So, all right. So you got in there, and then you got pretty good seats. Were you on the floor? We
were on the floor. We were young enough, so we were all on the floor. We were about halfway back, sort of over by the soundboard. Didn't push up to the front because it was just too damn hot and too damn crowded. And it's not a big place, so we were able to see pretty well from where we were. We were over on Brent's side. Back then, you could say Brent's side, and Brent's side and Jerry's side, and then they're kind of looking up from there. And Santana was the opener, so that was a nice bonus. He put on a heck of a show. And we got in there and watched him. It seemed like a fair bit of the crowd kind of didn't care about Santana, which sort of blew me away because just, wow, talk about a 1-2 punch. Having the Dead and Santana together. But no, they were great. And the problem with the Tacoma Dome is the sound was not real good. It was frankly bad. Santana wasn't terrible. And the Deads got better as the show went on. But when the Dead first came on, it was awful. Just truly, truly awful. So a lot of the crowd was kind of, geez, what's this all about?
Yeah, big wooden place. Like I said, when I was getting ready for this, I did a little research, and I did notice there were some people who had been there as well and mentioned that the sound was a little wonky. And so as I was listening to it, I could hear, just the drums in particular. You could you hear that snare, and it's like,
yeah.
Which they used a great effect if you listen to the China Rider right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like in that period, the drummers, they got a little over anxious sometimes, and there was just a whole lot of drums going on in some places that maybe there shouldn't have been. But the beginning of that China, I think they really heard what the room was doing and played it, and it was a cool, unique intro to that China Rider, I thought, because of
it that. Was, and I thought the drums they were thinking about that too. Because normally I'm not a huge fan of drums, but at least I went back and listened to this too. And I thought, I appreciated that more. And I can remember when I was there really enjoying it because, one, it wasn't too long. And even the space was kind of cool because it wasn't too long. Like sometimes, space can go on a little long, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But that one I thought worked.
Yeah, that was definitely
when you
the
went
highlight.
Back, did you hear the howl during Sugary?
Not necessarily. Was that you?
There was there was something happened. There was some feedback explosion that came right at the end of Sugary. And I remember, and the band just stopped and stared. What the hell's going on? They're staring out at Healy like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah, I did hear that. And even I made a note of that actually here. The sound, is this just the recording, or did this happen in this show?
That happened live. Never forgot it.
Yeah.
It was loud, and we were just you clamp your ears, and it scared the hell out of everybody.
Yeah, I imagine that was pretty loud, and so I did notice that as the first set went on, it kind of I felt like they would play loud, and it would get really you just echoing loud, and I think they noticed, and the quieter parts, starting like Row Jimmy, for instance, the quieter parts.
Row Jimmy, I thought
they were really quiet when they got to those quiet parts. Just to minimize that, I thought even the music never stopped was a little mellow in the beginning. I think because. Yeah,
I think they were responding because they came out with Hell in a Bucket, and they tried to rock it up, and it just was not working. No. And so they pulled it back a bit, and I think by the time they got to Masterpiece, they'd kind of figured it out where they were going.
Yeah, that was an interesting Masterpiece too. Here, and Jerry and Bob singing. I mean, Bobby always sings it, but Jerry sang almost the whole song with them. Just dropping out occasionally when typically I'm glad when he just chimes in on the "When I Pay," you know. I'm happy to hear that. But yeah, he was singing the whole thing, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't remember hearing that other times. So.
Oh, Jerry loved to sing Dylan.
Yeah.
Jerry loved Dylan, and so there's various discs that I've got over the course of the years are just the Dead does Dylan, not the commercial one, but just a collection of other stuff where the Dead or the Jerry Garcia Band are doing Dylan, and Jerry he liked Bob. A little bit like Jimi Hendrix, I think, where he just appreciated that someone with that terrible a voice could be that good.
No doubt. Yeah, that was kind of, and it seems like when I was seeing him in the early '90s, there was always that Dylan slot. So like every night, you were going to get a Dylan song, and whether it was Masterpiece or Desolation Row, or any number of them.
I would have loved to have got Desolation Row. I never got one, but I was pretty happy with Masterpiece too.
Yeah.
Tom Thumb's Blues would have been awesome as well.
I got that one a few times. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, because there you get the real Jerry singing.
Well, that was Phil singing Tom Thumb.
Or Phil, yes, of course, yeah.
So stepping on Jerry's toes, but that's all right.
The only thing you could get Phil to sing back then.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The Box of Rain once a year, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So, and then. Like I said, that China Cat, the writer was pretty good. I thought the transition from terrific. They were finally getting locked in. One thing I didn't mention was that odd Iko in the middle of the first set, which was kind of
cool. It didn't really go anywhere. The sound was terrible, and I don't remember. I mean, I kind of remember it when I was there, just because I've always liked it because it's fun.
Yeah.
But on listening to it again, I said, now I know I don't have any real clear memories other than that it existed. Because there's just nothing much happening with it.
That and the Good Time Blues, which I read that, I was like, Good Time Blues? What's Good Time Blues? What's Good Time Blues? And I couldn't think of it. And then I was listening to it, I was like, it's Never Trust a Woman. And so I had to dig into what the hell that's about. And evidently when Brent was alive, it was Good Time Blues, but after he had passed and they released a couple of light discs for whatever reason, they named it Never Trust a Woman. So who knows where or when that happened or why. But
I could never figure that out either. But
I was looking at the list. I was like, what is Good Time Blues? But I tell you though, from the play-in to the Uncle John Smith, the play-in and the band jam that happens in there, the tone that Jerry pulls out is just nasty.
The second set is just super strong, really all the way through. The first set was fun, but kind of uneven. Road Jimmy was probably the highlight for me. And the Masterpiece was nice, but it was, but you couldn't really hear it. The second set was outstanding. From the moment they got back out there, right all the way through, there really just wasn't a miss. The playing was good. I wish they played it for 40 minutes like they did in 1973, but they don't anymore. They don't anymore. The Uncle John's was great.
Yeah, nice and smooth and just right on the beat. Jerry was feeling it, shouting that goddamn I Declare out there.
And they just kept, and they moved through it was seamless. It was just nice segues, transitions. They were really good. And then when they got After Space with the Black Peter, that was, you think that, I think they were actually looking for quieter songs at that point, just because of the room and the way that it went, because the Black Peter fit just perfectly.
It did.
Both the mood and the room.
Yeah, I was surprised at the Touch of Grey right out of space, but of the era, it wasn't. It was kind of a new song. Well, I guess not really, but
no,
it just came out on the album or whatever. But I thought that was actually kind of a good version of Touch of Grey. I mean, they were really just firing on all the cylinders, and then Miracle comes out, and I thought, wow, this is a tight, solid Miracle, and then Black Peter, that was just a great.
The touch of Grey got the crowd going, as you can imagine, because it was the early mix, because there was all the old Deadheads that were there, and then they got mixed in with a lot of the the younger ones who had been brought in by Touch of Grey. So they were the younger ones were a little bit mystified by some of the earlier shit, but they responded well to Touch of Grey.
Yeah, and I could hear the crowd even in the recording I listened to. I was like, oh. They fired up for the Touch of Grey. Yeah.
Because you got to remember, for people coming in back then, and you must remember this too, is that in the 80s it wasn't all that easy to get a hold of tapes. Nowadays you tick, tick, tick onto the internet and you've got anything you want, anytime, anywhere. Back then it was tough, particularly in Canada, because we didn't have relics sent up here anywhere. So it was really, really difficult to connect with people who would actually have tapes to do it. We were mostly resorting to, there was a record store in Bellingham that would sell Italian bootlegs of tapes. And you go down there and you'd pay some staggering amount of money for this cruddy bootleg of some, shitty audience. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. But this crappy audience tape. But we were just desperate to get it because we really couldn't get anything else up until in the 90s, once the internet came around. And we were able to start joining groups and trading circles. It got so much easier, and you got so much more material.
Yeah, I was lucky to I had a buddy who had maybe 20 or 30 tapes, and he knew some friends. And being from Central Indiana, everybody I knew was pretty much starved for something new. So I started giving the tapes out, and then they all went off to college, and then came back like, hey, I got 100 more tapes, from college, and that was right about the time I started at Ball State and met some people, and if you weren't in college, it was tough to find stuff, if you weren't on tour already.
And the other part of it is that, that's the difference between you live in a country with 330 million people. Our population is smaller than California's, and,
True.
And it's just the number of people and the number of connections just aren't there. So it was tough back then. Like, we had a handful of tapes that we treasured, and you're always looking to get more.
Yeah, I could probably repeat the dates of those handful I had. right in the beginning. I just wore them out,
Oh, so did 7/27/72 end up in there?
Yeah, definitely. That one, and man, one that I ended up getting that was I think it was from '88, maybe the Oakland Coliseum, and I believe the Neville brothers had come out and they were doing like hand jive and it just had the weirdest tape hiss on it that I remember somehow, and that thing is just burned in my brain now. So this Tacoma show. What was it? What was, obviously there was some technical issues. The song choices were pretty good, but what was it that really made this one the one that stands out to you as a memory and a good time?
You never forget your first.
Yeah, definitely that.
It was just an event, because like I said, all my buddies have been going down to California for years, and I'd been staying behind. So they'd come back with, tales of how much fun it was and how exciting it was. And I'd go, oh, that's great. Like sticking pins into my voodoo dolls of them.
Right.
But, and finally I got to partake of the experience. And it was an experience. I read the reviews the same way as I suppose you did. And a lot of people crapped on that show. And I don't think that that's a fair appraisal. It's not just attendance bias. Mm-hmm. I didn't think so at the time. And even listening to the tapes, I don't think so. The sound was terrible, but I thought the band was in pretty good shape. Jerry was certainly in better shape than he had been for years before and would be in years after. That sort of 87 through 91, he wasn't bad. After that, things went south again. Mm-hmm. And before that, it had been years since he'd been engaged. So it was a pretty good time to hit the band.
It was.
And the crowd was fun too. There was a great mix.
Yeah,
if you'll forgive me an anecdote, kind of the high point of the crowd was during the set break. We were down on the floor, so we were just kind of wandering around, wondering what to do, looking for water mainly because it was so bloody hot in there.
Right.
And there was various groups that had broken off into drumming circles, and there's various groups that are drumming here, sitting around over there. We're kind of watching them, and at one point, there's this guy, skinny guy, older than me, long hair and a beard. He was probably, I don't know, 30s, early 30s, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a pair of cut-off shorts and nothing else. He stands up, looks out, raises his arms, and screams to the crowd, "Has anybody got any bongos?" Depended on it.
That's great.
Yeah, maybe did.
That's all. The people you meet, the things you see, you just never know.
Yeah. I don't know if he ever got any bongos, but he made an appeal that I never forgot.
That's important. That's important. That's life changing right there. It's stuck with
I
you.
guess, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
Awesome.
just, I mean, it was life changing too, because after the show, the Dead went down, and there was two more shows in Eugene, which is another, sort of 4 or 5 hours south. And Andrea and I, like I said, this was, sort of technically our honeymoon. And our plans had been to go to the show, and then we were going to go camping up in the Cascades and make our way back up into central BC, where she had a friend who had a house up in the central interior. And so we were going to do that. And as soon as the show was over, we go out, and I say to her, "Well, let's say we go to Eugene." And I couldn't convince her, which is one of my great regrets.
Oh, how many shows did you get to see?
I don't know. It was around 7 or 8, because there really wasn't that many shows by the time I went there. And also, I was the dutiful student. And during those years, I didn't have a ton of money, and I was in university. I didn't finish university until 1989, and then I was sort of young and sort of had a job, and then didn't have enough time. And so you would see the shows whenever they came close. I would go to see them, but I didn't have either the money or the time to go on tour. So it's too bad.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's what it is.
Yeah, we get to as many as we can, and
Yeah,
that's great.
I enjoyed everyone that I was at.
Yeah, are you seeing Dead and Company or?
I haven't seen. The last time I had tickets for Dead and Company, he was coming past Tacoma. It was it was somewhere east of Seattle, and I was coming back. I'd gone on a bicycle ride down in Central Oregon, and I had tickets because I figured, okay, I'll be able to. That there was a week-long ride. I figured I'll finish it. I'll be able to drive up, catch the show, and carry on. And but the day was slow. I was late, and by the time I got there, it was raining horseshoes and hammer handles. And I don't know if you've ever been in a Pacific Northwest rain in the autumn, but you ain't seen nothing like it.
No.
And you don't go out into an outdoor venue at that. So I drove by. So Dead and Co. They kind of don't do anything for me. I've seen most of Phil's bands a number of times. Including to the point I went down to Las Vegas to play hockey with a bunch of my buddies, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And we were just having breakfast, and I see this truck driving up and down the strip. And it's, that truck with the sign on it where normally they're advertising, go to the Peeler Bar and go see the girls.
Yep.
This one said, Phil Lesh and Friends, and gave a venue. And I went, what? And so I went out, I kind of figured out where it was, and it turned out that Phil was there that night. And so we'd gone out he was there the next night. And so after dinner, there's 20 of us. And we're at the dinner at, I don't know, some hotel. I can't remember what it was because Vegas isn't really my thing. But we go there, and afterwards I says, I got to find out where Phil is. And so I'm dragging this group of guys, none of whom could care less about the Grateful Dead, through all these nooks and crannies until I find the Brooklyn Bowl in Las Vegas, which is near some casino. I can't remember where it is. I think there's a Ferris wheel down at the end. But anyways, I find the Brooklyn Bowl, and I go up and I say, have you got tickets for Phil tomorrow night? Yes, we do. I will buy one, thank you. And so, I went, just serendipitous Phil. There he was.
Happy coincidence.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on and talking about, all this thing that we all enjoyed and wish we could still do. There is the Dead and Company, and there is the fish scene and all, but I feel like that was kind of a special time and place that it's going to be hard to duplicate somehow.
Well, for me, I'm becoming an old fart, so it was a special time and place because I wasn't an old fart then.
True that.
And I do like. I like all the other scenes, and it's fun. But you're right. There was something special that went on there.
Yeah.
And it got a little screwy at the end, but it was nice, and you always felt like you were among friends. Not that you don't feel the same way with the other ones, but. I agree with you. It wasn't just quite the same.
Yeah,
so that's maybe nostalgia.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. But all right, Dave Christian.
Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Hey now, do you have a great story about a Grateful Dead show you were at? I'd love to hear it and maybe have you on the podcast. Send me an email at will@talesfromthelot.org and let me know what show you would like to talk about and what made it so special to you.